Welcome back, Hornets. We are ready for another Ready Workbook lesson. Today we're going to be working with Lesson 13, Part 1. This is on page 129 in your Ready Workbook. So if you don't have out your materials, take this time to pause the video and get out what you need. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, since this is a new lesson, is I'm going to box in my title. And the title of lesson 13 is Analyzing Rhyme and Repetition. And after I have my title boxed in, I'm going to rewrite it up at the top so I can break it apart and analyze it. So, analyzing rhyme and repetition. Okay, so we know this word analyzing means to break something apart, um, to take a closer look at it. So we know that we're going to be breaking apart rhyme and repetition. So we know rhyme deals with the same ending sound. So it deals with end sounds, or ending sounds, I should say. And repetition, for the most part, deals with three specific things. We have word repetition, which deals with words or phrases getting repeated over and over in the text. We know we also have alliteration, which deals with the repetition of consonant sounds. And then we have assonance, which deals with the repetition of vowel sounds. So those three are not new sound devices. We've been talking about those for a while, so they should still be pretty familiar to you. And we know anytime we are considering rhyme and repetition, we are also going to think about tone and whether or not the tone is positive, negative, or neutral. And we're also going to think about the author's meaning. So, anytime we are considering tone and the author's meaning, we know that that all works together um, to help create unity within a text. And all of these sound devices, rhyme, repetition, all of those are also going to work together to help us create unity. The whole purpose of all of this is to help create unity in tone and the author's meaning. All right, so now that we've broken apart our title, let's take a minute to look at our standard. So we're still dealing with RL 7.4, which is analyzing the impact of specific word choice, particularly alliteration, assonance, word repetition, to figure out the meaning and the tone. So this is the same standard we've been dealing with since lesson 12. So this is not something new. This lesson is actually going to go by pretty quick for us because nothing that we're doing in this lesson is new stuff. This is stuff we've been practicing for several weeks. All right, so the theme of lesson 13 is honoring heroes. So every text we're going to look at several types of texts. They're all going to have something to do with honoring heroes. All right, so we're going to keep that in mind, and we're going to keep what we know about sound devices, repetition and rhyme. We're going to keep all that in mind, and let's go ahead and start looking at our intro. So it says, "Did you know that a song is a poem in disguise? Like songwriters, poets, and other authors revel in the musical quality of language. They use words, sounds, and rhymes in creative ways." So, a poem, we've talked about this before, but a poem and a song have a lot in common. A song is just like a poem, it's just kind of set to music. And the authors of poets and, people who write the songs, they all do so to be as creative as possible and to express their ideas in unique ways. So they're going to have specific word choice, they're going to use different sounds, and they're going to use rhythm in creative ways to express tone and meaning. All right, so now let's kind of get into the meat of this and see what it's telling us. So it says a repetition is the repeated use of a sound, word, phrase, or line. So we already knew that. This is not something new. We know repetition is something that's getting repeated over and over again in a text. Repetition can deal with sounds, it can deal with words, phrases, or maybe an entire line of a poem, just depending. So, and repetition is one way in which authors produce an effect that adds meaning. So they always use repetition to add to the meaning of the text. So an example of this would be alliteration. So alliteration is one type of repetition. And that's the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words. So we've dealt with alliteration for a while. We've been practicing it especially a lot last week. So make sure you keep that in mind. So, rhyme would be another example, and rhyme is the repetition of sounds at the ends of words. So, we know words rhyme if they have the same ending sound. And the purpose of a rhyme is to give a poem a musical quality that creates unity between ideas. So that is the purpose of the rhyme, is to create unity. And I want you to make sure that you know that everything is connected and works together. So it's important that we know that everything is put in a text for a reason, and it's all there to make connections and work together and create unity and meaning and tone. All right, so now that we have looked at our intro, let's see what our directions are asking us to do next. So they say to read the poem. So we already know we're dealing with a poem. And then we're going to look for ways in which the poet uses rhyme and alliteration. So we're looking for examples of the ending sound that's the same and the repetition of our consonant sounds. So since we know this is a poem, let's talk about a few things we know about poems. So we know poems are always going to have a rhyme scheme that we will have to find. So they will also have some rhythm. Um Depending what type of poem it is, right? Not all poems have a consistent rhyme scheme or rhythm, but we know that that's something we're going to have to look for. And we can also think about tone as we analyze this poem and see if we can see if the tone could be helped, if the tone is helped created with certain sound devices. So a rhyme, alliteration, assonance. And another thing I want you to keep in mind with poetry is, yeah, we know that it could potentially have a rhyme scheme. We're going to have to look and see if it does. But there are other things that can rhyme within a poem. The rhyme doesn't have to come at the end of every line. There could also be words that rhyme within the poem. And this is called internal rhyme. It's where you have words that are within the poem, not on the end of the lines, that rhyme. So I'm going to make myself a note that this is just rhyme within the poem. And I think this poem has one example, so whenever we get to it, I'll show you. All right, so it looks like what we have to look at is a web page on a computer from Mr. Minton's poetry page. And the title of the poem we're going to be looking at is Night Rescue by B.B. Nolan. So I'm going to box in the title of my poem. Just based on the title of the poem, maybe I can assume that maybe there's some type of rescue going on at nighttime, and we know rescue, a synonym for that would be save. So maybe someone's getting saved in the middle of the night. We'll see. All right, so before we can read, the first thing I'm going to do is number my lines. Typically, poems are numbered Their lines are numbered in intervals of 5. So they don't number every line, they just number every 5. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to count how many I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 lines, and I'm going to number the 5th line right there so it's easy for me to go back and see what's next. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and find my rhyme scheme. We've practiced this, but let's work through it again. We know that we have to look at the last word of every line of the poem. So we don't have a ton of things to deal with here. So this will be an easy one to find. And we're looking to see if the words rhyme. And we start with the word said. And since it's the first word we're dealing with, it automatically gets the letter A because we always do rhyme scheme in alphabetical order. So now we're going to go to line number 2 and look at that word bed. We're going to see if it rhymes with the word said. So bed, said, they rhyme. So bed also gets an A. And now we're dealing with sky on line number 3. Well, sky doesn't rhyme with said or bed, so it gets a new letter. Next, we have fry in line number 4. So fry, if you look up, it rhymes with sky, so that one also gets a B. And now we have hall on the 5th line. So hall doesn't rhyme with anything we've looked at, so it gets a new letter, and we're at C now. And then the last line of the poem, 6, line 6, the last word is all. So all rhymes with hall, so it gets a letter C. So before we move on and start reading, I want us to notice the pattern here. It seems like every 2 lines are repeating themselves. So said, bed, sky, fry, and then hall and all. So I'm going to show you guys how to create a poetry tree. So how we do this is I'm going to put one big bracket around the entire poem because we know that this is one text, this is a one work, so it's all working together to get across the same idea. However, there are some connections we could make within the poem. And one way you can look for those connections is by analyzing the rhyme scheme and seeing what lines rhyme and which don't. So if you look, line 1 and 2, they end with words that rhyme. So I can probably assume maybe there's some type of connection that's going on between line 1 and 2. Line 3 and 4 also rhyme. They both end with sky and fry, so those rhyme, so there could be some connection there. And then lines 5 and 6, those also rhyme. So I'm going to draw some little arrows right there. So I know that there are things working together in this poem to help me understand what's going on in the overall poem. This is one way I can figure out how the poem is working together to establish unity in tone and meaning by looking at how the rhyme scheme is connected to each other. So, my overall rhyme scheme for this would be A, B, B, C, C. And whenever poems have more than one stanza, and we'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow as well, but when poems have more than one stanzas, you can even break it apart even further and see if the stanzas are connected or not. But we'll practice that a little bit later. So now let's go ahead and read the poem. We're going to read it once for understanding, and then we'll go back and look for rhyme and alliteration. We've already found a few examples of rhyme, but we're going to take it a step further. All right, so we've got Night Rescue by B.B. Nolan. It is just a small storm, the weatherman said, so my sleepy sisters slipped off to bed. Then, just a small storm shot a bolt from the sky. Our house shook from the jolt wires starting to fry. Soon, swirlings of smoke sailed away down the hall. But brave heroes quickly came and rescued us all. Alright, so that's a cool little poem, Night Rescue. So we know that their house, apparently got struck by a bolt of lightning right in there. Electric wires started to fry and stuff caught on fire, but they were saved. So happy ending there. Alright, so first we're gonna look at our examples of rhyme, and we've actually got our rhyme identified. So rhyme, the end rhyme, so we found with the rhyme scheme at the last of the last line of the last word of each line of the poem we've already established what rhymes there. So we said said and bed, those 2 rhyme, sky and fry rhyme, and then hall and all. However, even though those rhyme, there are a couple of other things that rhyme within the poem. This would be our internal rhyme. So if you look, we have this word bolt, and bolt rhymes with jolt. They both have that alt sound at the end. So that is one example of internal rhyme. So I'm going to draw a little arrow like that to show that bolt and jolt, they do rhyme. Okay, so now that we have found several examples of rhyme, let's look for alliteration. And we know alliteration is the repetition of our consonant sounds. So let's see what we can find. All right. So, in line number 1, it is just a small storm, the weatherman said. So, small storm would be one example because they both begin with that same sound at the beginning. In line number 2, so my sleepy sister slipped. That's another example. So, sleepy, so my sleepy sister slipped. That's one example. And in line number 3, it repeats small storm. So not only is this an example of alliteration, we know that this is a good example of repetition because it's already mentioned small storm. It says it's just a small storm. This is getting repeated. So we know that something is important about that. So just a small storm shot a bolt from the sky. So small storm shot. That's another example. And then our house shook. So, sky also works. So we have this S being repeated all over the place. So shook and then started. That's another example. And line 5, soon swirlings of smoke. The S is getting repeated again. So that S is just all over the place. Smoke sailed. It's another section of it. And then in line number 6, but brave. So finally, we have something other than the S's, but brave heroes. So, but brave is another example of alliteration. It has that beginning B sound. So, we have several examples of alliteration, a few examples of rhyme, right? So, we've noticed for sure that that S sound is getting repeated all over the poem. And in the last line, we have but brave, an example of alliteration for the bus sound. It's getting repeated. All right, so now we found several examples. So let's move on down to the bottom of the page and look at our chart. So my directions tell me to draw arrows to connect pairs of rhyming words, and then I have to circle the examples of alliteration. So we've already done this, guys. So just from analyzing the poem, we have connected our pairs of rhyming words with arrows, and we circled our examples of alliteration. So that's taken care of. We don't have to worry about that. Now we just have to look at the chart. So we're going to think about the poet's word choice, how the poet's word choice affects the poem. We know that authors use words for specific reasons. They always have something going on. It's not just random. So we're going to think about how their word choice affects the poem, and then we are going to compare our thoughts to the chart below. So, just looking at the poem, I've noticed that S sound kind of definitely, I want to say that S is all over the place. So it's calling my attention to certain words. The rhyme at the end, I would say it's definitely there to kinda help us make meaning, and maybe even help with the tone. So just keeping those things in mind, let's go ahead and look at the chart. So the chart is split up into 3 columns. The first column is for sound devices, the second column is for examples from the text, and then we have impact on meaning. So, whenever we get to the impact on meaning section, we have to try to think about why the author does what they do. So, why does the author. Oh. why the author does it. So that's what you have to think about whenever you get to the impact on meaning. You're trying to figure out why the author uses those specific sound devices to establish their meaning or tone. All right, so we know that for this poem, we were looking at two specific sound devices. We were looking at rhyme, which deals with the same end sounds. And we were also looking at alliteration, which deals with the consonant sounds. And just so you know, all of these work together in the poem to create unity. It's all there to establish unity in tone and meaning. And when I say they're there to establish tone and meaning, they work together. That's what unity is all about. Unity is about how certain things work together in the poem to get across one meaning, one tone. So these sound devices are working together in the same poem to help us understand what the author means and what the author's trying to get across to us. So let's go ahead and break this down. We know, let's look at our first row. So the sound device we're dealing with is rhyming words. So we picked out several examples from the text, and they're all here for us. We said that said and bed rhyme. We said bolt and jolt rhyme. That was our example of internal rhyme. And then we have sky and fry and hall and all. So those were our examples from the text. So now we just have to think about the impact on the meaning. We have to think, why does the author do this? Why does the author use rhyme? What is their purpose? So the author is going to use rhyme to connect ideas and create unity and structure. So there's that word unity again. So everything is there to create unity and structure. So structure, when I say structure, I'm dealing with the rhyme scheme. Structure, rhyme scheme is just one example of structure within a poem. So everything is there to create unity and to connect ideas. So we know rhyming words. Whenever we filled out our poetry tree, we talked about how those rhyming words, they help make connections. There's something connecting them together. Those ideas are connected by the rhyme. So that's why we have to think about how rhyme connects ideas and it helps establish unity. So now let's talk about alliteration, which was our consonant sounds. So the examples from the text it gives us are small storm, sleepy sister slipped, swoons, soon swirlings, and smoke sailed. So all of these have that S sound at the beginning. They didn't put our example of but brave, but that's okay. Right now we're just talking about this repetition of the S sound at the beginning. So now we have to think about our impact on meaning. So, why the author uses this alliteration? What are they trying to accomplish? So, the author's going to use the same sound because it calls attention to those words. So, that's the purpose. That same beginning sound, that S sound, calls our attention to those words. So, it emphasizes it. It brings our attention to it. Okay, so we know that authors always do things on purpose. Any type of sound device they use, it's there to work together to help us establish unity. It's all there for unity and to connect those ideas. So let's look at our little closing paragraph. So it says, all authors choose words to convey meaning. So any word choice an author uses is there to convey meaning. And I want you to know the authors choose the words that they choose on purpose. It's not by accident. Okay. But some authors, especially poets, arrange words to make the best use of their sounds. So they do it because it helps the flow of the poem. So being aware of sound devices such as alliteration and rhyme will help you hear how words can flow together in a way that's music to your ears. So, certain sound devices are going to help the poem kind of flow together in a way that's kind of musical. It's very rhythmic, but keep in mind that that's all on purpose and it's all working together to establish the unity in the author's meaning and even the tone. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for part one. If you have questions about anything I have talked about, feel free to let me know. That's what I'm here for. But if not, we will pick up on part two tomorrow. All right, guys, talk to you later.